Welcome to College Bound Success, College to Career, the podcast for college curious and college bound students and families. Together, we'll navigate the journey from high school to higher education and beyond. I'm Mark Mostalski, an independent college success consultant, and I'm here to share strategies, insights, and stories to help you make confident choices about college, careers, and your future. So let's get started. So today I'm super excited. It's a little bit of a reunion. I'm excited to invite Jill Marks and Jennifer Rosen for a conversation today. Now, I've already mentioned to two of you, this is my first time having two guests on, and I think it's a really great thing. For those of you, you're maybe watching this for the first time, just real quickly, I used to work at the University of Colorado's College of Nursing. And that's where I got to know both Jill and Jen. And I have the great honor to welcome them back and have a really great conversation. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
I'm
a great
excited to have you. So we're going to get into a lot of different things about, being a nurse practitioner and who you are and what you do. But what I always like to do is just first start out with, so people listening to this understand like your background. And because I do call this, college to career. So I want to make sure we kind of reflect on that and who you are, where you're from, what your college journey was like. So let's start. Jen, can we start with you?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, what's your background? Where did you grow up? What was your college journey like?
Well, I think if I talk longer than a minute, you'll be able to guess, but I'm from Philadelphia, born and raised. And so I went to college at the University of Michigan. I followed my brother there. He was an avid sports fan, and I think I saw one awesome hockey game. I was like, I gotta go. And so I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I studied liberal arts, really unsure kind of where it would take me.
Yeah. So studied liberal arts, and so your degree was what then?
I got a bachelor's of science in biology with a minor in Near Eastern civilizations.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Early
yeah,
civilization.
yeah.
Okay.
The real Near East early civilization. So very
Oh,
pertinent.
that's awesome. This is why I enjoy
Fun
doing this because
facts.
you just you right, just like my
Yeah.
background's mechanical engineering. I tell people that and they're like, "What? Like what's where how did you end up there?" So, oh, that's awesome. Now, what do you do now? What is your role at the University of Colorado?
So I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. I'm the specialty director of CU Anschutz's pediatric primary care nurse practitioner program. 30% of my time is in clinical practice at the Young Mothers and Families Clinic, where I have the honor of taking care of teen moms and their children in dyad care. And then the other part of my FTE is running and teaching the PEDS primary care program at CU.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Jen. Um, so next we're going to move to Jill. Same question for you. So yeah, who are you? What was your background and going through college, all that good stuff?
Yeah. I actually grew up in a really rural part of Wisconsin, and wasn't sure when I went to college. I had no idea even where I wanted to go to college. I ended up going to Marquette University in Milwaukee, honestly, because I followed a boyfriend to Milwaukee. That's how I got to Marquette. And so I went there, and it was a tough transition for me. I came from a really rural area. I hadn't received any college counseling. And this was like, I'm dating myself here, but this was before the time of the internet. I had a little bit of a tough transition to college. I lost my scholarship when I got there that I'd gotten because I didn't know how to study, and it was a tough time. I actually started out a biology major and then switched my major to social work, and then I dabbled in some anthropology before I finally found nursing as my degree. Um, that's kind of how I ended up in nursing.
Okay. So I'd like to dive into that both a little bit. Jill, you talked about, yeah, you had kind of a wandering pathway for sure, and that's common these days. you tried out different types of majors, but you ended up doing, am I correct? You did a Bachelor of Science in Nursing at Marquette?
Yep, I did a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Yep, and I did
Okay,
graduate in 4 years. Despite that, I had to take a little bit of summer school, but I made it out in 4 years.
there you go. So, all right, so you ended up, that was your first degree. You got a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing from Marquette. So you ended up finding that pathway while you were still pursuing your first degree. Um, Jen, I heard something I think a little bit different. So, how did you end up finding your way to nursing?
As my mother says, I always like to take the circuitous route, and it's really about the journey, not the destination. And so, being at the University of Michigan in the liberal arts, I didn't have as much exposure to other health sciences. The people around me that were taking the science classes that I liked were going pre-med. And so I was kind of uncertain about, I knew I wanted to do something in healthcare, but wasn't quite sure. So I studied biology so I could have my pre-med, pre-health courses. But because I was not certain, I knew I wanted to work for a little bit. And that's what I did. I worked in public health. I had my first job out of school. I think it was my favorite job today. I taught nutrition in the public schools of Philadelphia, and I fell in love with working with kids, education, health promotion, goal setting with them, and so I continued working in public health. Got my master's in public health, but the higher up I got in public health, I was missing that one-on-one coaching,
Hmm,
talking to patients. And
right.
so that experience really led me to step back and reflect. What am I going to do? Am I going to go to med school? Am I going to go to PA school? Am I going to go to NP school? And I think from really doing a lot of talking to a lot of different individuals, shadowing, I think for me, and this is at the time, many, many years ago, I think medicine is doing a better job of incorporating public health and social determinants of health. But at the time, nursing really um, was the field and the perspective of becoming a primary care provider, but also blending that public health background that I had. And so I knew I wanted to stay in community health. I wanted to do primary care. And because of that, I applied to like two schools,
Hmm,
and I got into University of Pennsylvania. They have a combined BSN to MSN program, so I could go straight through, and that's what I did to become a PEDS nurse practitioner. Not common in the central part of the country, very common on the East Coast, and so it was a big transition when I moved to Colorado with my husband to get a job because it's not the model of education in the Midwest, but for those who are really know what they want to do, there are great schools where you can go straight through if you want to work in primary care.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually discussed those different pathways on some of my earlier podcasts. So yeah, that's one of the unique things about nursing, right? There's not just one way to get there. There's so many different pathways.
For sure.
Um, Jill, I do want to go back to you because I don't think so what is your current role at the University of Colorado?
Yeah, I am the specialty director for the acute care pediatric nurse practitioner program at CU. And I also have a clinical practice as well. Half my time is spent in clinical practice. I'm currently an inpatient pediatric nurse practitioner in pediatric neurology at the Children's Hospital. And then the other half of my time is spent teaching and leading the pediatric acute care nurse practitioner program.
Awesome. Great. And that is why we have both of you here today. Because yeah, you're both peds and Ps, but Jill, you focus on acute and Jen on primary care. And you are both well aware of this. That's one of the common questions that comes up, right? That when people are thinking about becoming a nurse practitioner, it's often which is the right route. Do I go acute? Do I go primary? What does that really mean? What does it mean for job prospects? All that stuff. So have some questions for you. Let's just get, if you were talking to somebody who already knew, like, I want to go into nursing, they're one of these, really planned out high school students, and they know that they don't just want to be a nurse, but they already know I want to become a nurse practitioner, right? I want to become an advanced practice. What questions though would you get them to think about, like what their pathway should be? to get there, to meet their goal. And I'll go, Jill, can we go with you first?
Sure. Yeah, I think I would probably start by asking like what drew them to nursing, like what's the part of it that they are really drawn to, or they think they find to be like a good fit with their personality. And I'd probably also want to know like what's their exposure to both nursing, to nurse practitioners, and actually to medicine in general, um,
Mm.
and healthcare, because I think not only within nursing, there's a lot of routes, but within healthcare, there's a lot of routes. So I think understanding the parts of it that they understand, and making sure that they're kind of coming in with the right idea about what the career is going to be like. I think a lot of folks think that being a nurse practitioner is like a higher level nurse. And the way I kind of look at it is it's really about taking your nursing background and experience, if you do have experience, although sometimes, as Jen pointed out, you don't always have to have that experience to be a great nurse practitioner. But it's taking that nursing background and the fundamentals of being a nurse and then applying it along with the medical model of taking care of children. So I think they're very different jobs. And what I often find in my students is that they're kind of surprised when they come to nurse practitioner school. And I'm like, hey, this is what we're going to do now. This is what your role is going to look like. And it wasn't quite what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I don't have a ton more to add. I think Jill really summed it up perfectly, but I do appreciate you calling out this need to question and talk with nurses about this opportunity to become a nurse practitioner. I see, especially at CU, our BSN cohorts are extremely diverse, not only socioeconomically, but from different experiences, and our NP profession is not. And so I think it's a question that more nurses need to ask, not just kind of what Jill is saying, but where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? How can we keep growing as a learner and as an educator? So I just really appreciate that, just calling that out specifically.
Jen, do you have a sense of why that is?
I don't, and I think about it a lot because I also teach in the undergrad courses, and
Right.
it's so obvious. But what
Hmm.
I do wonder is about having some direct pathways. I think once you start working and have a nurse's salary, get really comfortable, get on a good schedule, it might be hard to kind of disrupt that when you have a lot of other competing demands. But what if when you applied to nursing school, you also got into your NP degree? Would that change things? And so I don't know, but I think we want to really be thoughtful in how we're recruiting as NPs.
Yeah, and I would say there's a lot of data out there that says people get better health care when they're cared for by people in their own communities and
Hmm.
people that they
Right.
relate to and see as similar to themselves. And I think we're not doing a great job. And I would say specifically in pediatrics, I don't mind calling it out. Like I think when you look at pediatric nurse practitioners across the country, I think we have a lot of room to grow and improve our diversity for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's interesting because that's certainly been the case with nursing, and I think nursing, as a profession, has done a really great job of that. But yeah, it's interesting that you're not seeing that at the NP level. So, so as we just highlighted, you both specialize in peds, but again, Jill, your focus is acute care, and Jen, yours is primary. So for students that are considering, a nurse practitioner path, how how do they know? Like, how do they decide I should become primary or I should go acute care? And maybe both of you can touch on how did you arrive at it, knowing, okay, this is the right fit. Let's go. Yeah, we'll go for. Let's go to Jen on the
Okay.
primary care.
I was just gonna say I knew certain I wanted primary care. It was why went the track I did. You do not want to see me in an inpatient setting. That's not my skill set. And I do want to call out that for like an acute care nurse practitioner, having a very extensive inpatient nursing experience is critical. I do think there's a lot of opportunity in primary care. So I think when we think about primary versus acute, Jill and I have these conversations like all the time, not only with our potential applicants, but the students in our program. Like, did I make the right choice? And so I think for primary care, it's, you know, where do you see yourself practicing? A lot of our students are like gravitate to, I think, one, just the relationship with patients, kind of following certain, you know, a cohort of patients over time, having multiple touch points, being able to really be specialized in one specific area. A lot of our applicants are seeking kind of more, you know, 9 to 5 hours, which is another big draw. But I would say really like managing more stable conditions, but with that coming also focusing on the other kind of complexities of patient care outside of some of the medical conditions that we treat. Curious what you have to say, Jill.
Yeah, I think it's been really kind of interesting to watch. I've been a nurse practitioner, I think, since 2007 now. So I guess that's going on 20 years, which is like terrifying. But I think for peds acute care, really what I've seen kind of transition over the past 20 years is we all know that like kids are getting sicker, patients are getting sicker, the kids in the hospital overall are sicker. And if you think about the population that a peds acute care nurse practitioner should care for, we really think about it being children with acute and chronic illness. And typically, acute care nurse practitioners work in a hospital, whether it's like in an inpatient setting or a subspecialty clinic. But it wouldn't be like in a primary care setting where you're seeing that patient for their well visits and really having that kind of relationship over time. I do think it is really important when deciding to recognize kind of what Jen touched on, like anymore, if you're looking at working in a hospital setting, it's probably not going to be a 9 to 5 role. We know the hospital is 24/7. Our physician colleagues are there 24/7. Our medical trainees, residents, and fellows are there 24/7. And really, the expectation is that nurse practitioners are going to be there 24/7 also. So there are some roles, it's not 100%, but I think the idea that you're going to come to be a nurse practitioner and have a better schedule is definitely not a thing. Whereas I think, 15 years ago, people thought like, oh, I won't have to work nights anymore because it was a newer role, and that really wasn't what we were seeing in practice. But I think overall, what I would say is like, if you're someone who's interested in like an episodic acute thing or a very specific chronic illness that you want to become an expert in and care for those patients with that diagnosis, both when they're well and during times of episodes where they're more sick, that's where I would see you as an acute care nurse practitioner and really working in mostly a hospital setting, whether it be an inpatient hospital setting or an outpatient clinic setting.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So are there any other types of work environments where there's maybe like a gray crossover? And you both nodded. What would those be?
I think oh, sorry, Jen. I think the subspecialty clinics, things like pediatric surgery, even some like cardiology in our neurology practice. We have a lot of primary care certified folks. And so I think that area is really an overlap. Also, like an urgent care setting, I think that's an overlap with primary care trained nurse practitioners and acute care nurse practitioners. Yeah, I don't know. Jen, do you have any other ones?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is something that my graduates a lot of times will seek jobs in specialty care. So it's something that I'm constantly trying to get a sense of what are the trends and how does this changing for specialty care. But in reality, and how Jill kind of spoke was for Children's Hospital Colorado, our licensure and our Board of Nursing does not kind of dictate that. And so it's really based on your credentials as where you are practicing. And so at Children's Hospital, it does govern that, but it really is job by job, within a specialty. The idea is that when we think about our other APP colleagues like PAs, they can rotate, they can cover the inpatient wards and cover clinic, but really we are really meant to be managing patients maybe with chronic illness, but in a more stable condition. And so we are really kind of should be just clinic based. But I have graduates that have incredible NICU experience, but primary care certified in community hospitals, running the newborn, the well baby nursery, and even some like step down NICU, which, again, is really kind of beyond our scope as primary care. But there's a lot of different opportunities, I think, for folks, depending on the hospital, but it's really important for graduates to know kind of what does their hospital say, but they are their advocate of their own profession, and we are not preparing NPs in primary care to be managing acute conditions. And so I think that's where sometimes you have to educate your hospital to say, actually, this is outside my scope. So it can be really gray. I definitely see it can be really gray depending on the health system.
Yeah, the other thing I sometimes think about the difference too is there because there's so many roles that overlap. I often think that like the vast majority of acute care pediatric nurse practitioners practice in a hospital setting and typically a children's hospital, occasionally in like a community hospital or a pediatric hospital within an adult center. Um, but it's a pretty academic environment. They're generally practicing on a team. Like I have a team of people that I sit with every day. It's very academic. I talk to different services all day long. And I do think that that is a different environment. I'd be curious what Jen thinks, but like I sometimes think primary care is a little bit more independent. Not that I don't have independent practice as a peds acute care nurse practitioner, I certainly do. But I think that there's just a lot more discussion and talk, and sometimes that talk is academic. Like we're just discussing for discussing kind of sake, or for education. There's so much education because we have all the medical learners, medical students, medical residents, medical fellows, nurse practitioner students, PA students. That there's a ton of focus on education, and I sometimes think that the primary care role is just a little more independent or solo. I don't know what you think, Jen.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we have, I have students in school-based clinic where they're the only medical provider, in rural settings. And so it is a much more kind of, I think independence practice. We believe in collaboration, but a lot of times we are the leader of the healthcare team.
I know when
Oh,
people,
that's
people
interesting.
will say, "Oh gosh, it must be so scary to work in the PICU." And I think, no, I would be really scared to be in that clinic all by myself. Like I have 10 million other people here with me that I can talk to. Like seeing 20 patients a day or 30 or 40 in a clinic by myself would be a lot scarier.
Yeah, yeah. Jen, I want to segue a little bit to education side of things because not too long ago you completed your DNP. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and as we know, right, this is nothing new. There's all this discussion about masters and DNP, and some schools no longer even offer masters anymore, right? They've gone right to DNPs. But could you just talk about like what was that like for you, your education, getting your DNP, and how is it, what is the outcome? How did it enhance your skills?
Yeah, I think I really resisted it for a long time, and in retrospect, I'm just so glad I went for it. I had a lot of great support from Jill, from other colleagues at the university to continue on and get my DNP. I think first and foremost, as an educator, I when I was in school so many years ago, it was in person. It was full time. It was like a very different model. And so it just first gave me a new appreciation what it's like to be this like hybrid student, an independent learner. And so I have a whole new appreciation, I think, for my learners as faculty of what it's like to be a student. What are the challenges that we all face?
Mhm.
And so that's been really wonderful. And then I think also too, as the director of the program, the importance of that terminal degree. I think as a clinician, seeing, like Jill said, like 20 patients a day, 5 days a week, like I don't know if that was the right time for me. I don't know if it would made much a difference in my patient care, but I think for now, the leadership that it's taught me, that those pieces are really helpful. And I'm really grateful to have been able to do it at CU where I teach because it has given me a whole new perspective and a lot of pride for the institution that I work.
Yeah. Do you think it sounds like you feel like as somebody, and I so appreciate you said I resisted it because I think that's common out there. And now here you are smiling, and I'm glad you did it. You think that you're able now to help other people think about why they should take that step?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I am so grateful that CU is still offering like that MSN. I think as especially for primary care where there's such a shortage of primary care providers, specifically in peds, like we need to get more providers out in practice. And so, it's so funny because I remember when I was deciding, but I was actually looking at a PA school, and I was like, how do you know if you should do it a PA school or at med school? And they said to me, like, if you want to be the doctor in the room, go to med school. But if you don't care about the titles, the names, like, become an APP. And I was like, yeah. And it's so funny. Like, here I am with my DMP. But I think if you want to practice, you want to take care of patients, you want to build your clinical skills, and you want to work, like, go get your MSN and work and become the best clinician you can, and then figure out what do you want to do your DMP in? What clinical questions do you have? And I think for me, having worked as an NP for almost 15 years, people do this. I actually did it in public health nursing to tie back to my roots of public health. Like, I was able to just like look at clinical questions in a very different way. So for me, for that, I do coach oftentimes. But for there are others that they know they want this career in education, in the academic world, they want to do clinical leadership. I love that CU now has a program the same exact time to be able to go straight through and get their DMP as well. So I think both are really important to meet the current workforce challenges that we have right now.
Yeah. Like we said earlier, right? Many pathways helps many people get to where they want to go. So, yeah. So Jill, you've been doing this for a while. You helped launch the PEDS acute care program in 2014, and you're directing it today. So what has changed about how you prepare students now, maybe compared to 12 years ago when the program launched?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question. I thought a lot about it. Like, I think one thing that probably has changed is like I have more experience. So I think like it's always kind of easier when you have like a lot of years to look back and kind of use the knowledge you gained from those folks over time to kind of apply it to the people who are here now. I think one thing that's changed is I probably am like, I don't want to say more tolerant, but I think there's a lot of different ways to get to a point where you are. And I think I probably had some biases that I wasn't aware of when I first started in this like leadership role of how what I thought was the most important or not. And I think now I'm really realize that everybody comes to the table with like different strengths and weaknesses. And I think it's really important for people in education to be able to look at those and really focus on the strengths and then build a plan to really help that person get to where they need to be in the areas that they're less strong. And I think my ability to sort of see those really readily is certainly better because I've seen that many more students. I also think that over time I have really kind of tried to build a program where it's like, hey, there's a board exam at the end of this. Like, you have to be a competent nurse practitioner, and I want to prepare you for that board exam, and here are the things you need to know. But I think sometimes, as much as we hope that our board exams, they're going to determine minimum competence, but that doesn't necessarily mean they translate to sort of like everything you need to know to transition well into the nurse practitioner role. So I think I've really tried to create a program where I can do both. Like, I want you to be well prepared for your boards. I want you to be a competent provider, because I personally feel like everyone who comes out of my program, like, I'm responsible for the kids they take care of. Like, those are also my patients because I have trained them to be a nurse practitioner. But I also want people to leave with like a true understanding of what the role is like. And I want to talk to them about, teach them about, and make sure that they are prepared when they go to that job, whatever it might be, for what it's going to look like in terms of culture, what it's going to look like in terms of expectations outside of clinical care, because I think that's very different than the nursing role.
Would you be willing to, I appreciate what you just said, and you're contrasting the differences between, nursing and being an NP. So I'm interested in both your thoughts on this. What about experience? What is an ideal candidate for your programs, acute versus primary? What if somebody's like, can I get in without any, I just graduated in May, passed the NCLEX, and I want to start your program in September. Is that ideal? What do you two think about that?
I'll let
We'll
Jen.
start with Jen. Yeah, we'll let Jen go.
I would say I really look, I have like a holistic approach to this. And so I do think experience is so important, it's super critical because we're training these students to then become advanced practice providers and managing the care of children. And so I don't take that lightly. And so I want to see experience, whether you've been in the PICU, whether you've been in the ED, a school nurse, or maybe you've been, a health educator in the public schools like I was, or had these other experiences that I think really can serve as a to really support your experience and allow you to grow in your role. And so I think I'm a little more just open to what type of experience that may be. But I think that's very different from the acute care side.
Yeah, I think I would say similar. Like I feel similarly, and it's like holistic. I don't think there's like one way to get here. And I also think, as Jen talked about, like we know there's a shortage of healthcare providers, pediatric providers. And so I really want to balance all the time, like the needs of the healthcare system with the folks coming in. And I think I do prefer, and I really recommend that if people want to be an acute care pediatric nurse practitioner, that they do have some experience in pediatric nursing. Part of it is like, I want you to be able to look at a child and kind of understand the normal development of a child. And I want you to be able to recognize sick versus not sick, because that's something that takes time to sort of just learn. You have to be able to look at a child and kind of quickly assess. And so I do like people to have that experience. But actually, I guess it's one of the things that's changed over time too, Mark, in relation to your last question. Like, I think a lot of people have an idea that they would love to work in pediatric oncology because it seems like a really field that you can make a big difference, and they think it sounds great, or pediatric ICU, for instance. But I think if you've never actually been in that environment and you haven't cared for families and children when they are critically ill, or
Right.
with families and children who are dying or who may die or who do die, I think that it's really hard to understand if that's going to be something you actually want to do, that you actually want to be, experience that in your life on a regular basis. And so I do feel pretty strongly that you should have some experience in that way. I think there's many different ways you can get there. And so it's not like you have to work in the ICU. I had somebody apply who has been a leader of mission trips for 10 years and was the head of a mission trip in another country. And so certainly had that experience of seeing lots of sick kids and providing care, though didn't have a lot of nursing experience and was just graduating. So I think there are other ways to get there, but you have to start somewhere, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
So that's kind of,
one more thing to say too. Like, I think if you haven't seen the role, then it's like it's a little bit hard for me to say, sure, come here and spend $60,000, or in some, I mean, there are programs across the country that are $100,000, and say, come here and enroll and spend $100,000 to learn to do something that you don't understand or have never even seen in practice. So,
yeah. Yeah. So that's a nice segue. So, FNP, family nurse practitioner, is the largest specialty in the U.S. And this happened a lot when I worked at CU and would talk with prospective students, trying to figure out what they want to do. Often it was, well, FNP is the best because it's the most broad, right? They're everywhere. They get the biggest scope of practice and so forth. But you two both went a different route, being peds. So why should somebody consider specializing in something like peds, as opposed to more broad like an FNP?
Yeah, I think that's it's a really common question. And actually, I had been accepted to my PMP program, but hadn't yet started, and I was like, oh no, I think I should do FMP because then I can do everything, right? So I feel that is a real concern, but I'm so glad that I kind of stuck with my guns. I think you're in your gut. What population do you want to serve? Very different from PAs who don't have their licensure tied to a patient population in a setting.
Mm-hmm.
We do as nurse practitioners, and so I think the benefit of going of the NP route is that specialization, that all of your courses are with that specialty. And so for me, I knew I wanted to work with the pediatric population. I also love adolescents. And in my clinic as at the Young Mothers and Families Clinic, I do take care of teen parents and follow them through like age 25. So sometimes I wish I had some of that FNP knowledge. But again, it's about your scope. It's about the patient population you serve. Um, I wanted the most, as someone who did not have nursing experience, I wanted the most pediatric focused education to be prepared as a primary care provider. And for me, that was peds primary care. But I do think there is such a tremendous role for FNPs because of that flexibility that you don't get in other specialties, and to really be able to take care of the whole family in a way that most of the country, that's kind of how healthcare is delivered.
Yeah, I think, I mentioned earlier in this podcast that I grew up in a really rural area in northern Wisconsin, and all of my healthcare for my entire life was provided by either a PA or a nurse practitioner, actually. And my parents' providers currently are all nurse practitioners, and they're mostly
Mm,
PAs. And I think we have now, with what's happening with hospital closures and closures of healthcare systems in our rural communities, we have such a need for providers that I think the FNP is so important to be able to provide that care. It's really a primary care role, and we have so many communities that have a paucity of healthcare that um, I think it's a totally needed role. I definitely think if you're going to go the FNP route, then you're sort of accepting that it is a lot of patient population that you have to care for. And then you're really kind of owning that yourself to kind of become an expert in all the things you need to know across the ages, right? From newborns to geriatrics. But I think it's an incredibly important role. And to a point, I think a little bit about where you see yourself practicing and living kind of in your near term career. And I
right.
think too, there's always the option, like whatever route you choose. I think um, this is one thing I think that's true, like regardless of like where we're talking about nursing, whether it's undergrad. I mean, you heard me say I tried 10 different majors or whatever. But I think you can get a FNP degree, and if you start practicing, I have a student right now who's like, "Gosh, I've been practicing for 3 years, and I really realized I really just love the pediatric patients the most." And she's
Mhm.
coming back to get an acute care degree. She wants to work in subspecialty care. So I think there's always
Yeah,
the option to get a postgraduate certificate degree, which is usually brief. It's usually 3 semesters, and it allows you to have that additional certification to care for another population. So I don't think people should feel um, like they're going to be stuck doing something forever.
right.
Like the best thing about nursing, there's 50 million different things you can do with it.
Yeah, yeah, they're not pigeonholed forever. Yeah, let's say great. Um, all right, so we are getting towards the end here, and I really do appreciate your time and everything. But I because you are both, you're not just both providers, but you also run and oversee your specialty program. What should students be looking for when they do their own research to find an NP program? What do you think is important? Because lots of schools out there. What should they be focused on? We'll go to Jill and then back to Jen.
I think there's lots of different things to focus on. One thing I think is they should really look at the mission and the values of the university because that's going to set the tone for all of their education. So I think really being reflective about yourself and what your own mission kind of values, what's leading you to nursing, and seeing how that aligns.
Mm,
The college you're choosing, I think that's important. I think cost should be like very high up there. At the end of the day, like we're all getting degrees and we're all getting jobs, but we have to be able to pay our bills and survive with our families. So I really think being honest about the cost of the education and how that's going to affect your life is important because at the end of the day, most programs are good. I mean, sure, there are some bad ones out there, but I think taking a really critical look at is this a good program? What is their board pass rate? What is their rate of graduates getting jobs, how do they transition to practice, and the cost, and sort of seeing how that aligns for you. And I think a huge one is clinical placements. That might be the biggest one of all. Is
right.
is it a place that's going to find you a clinical placement, or do you have to find your own? I think if a university is saying, "Hey, we're going to find your clinical placements," what that says to me is they are doing something to make sure that the person they're sending you with is a good educator, that you're going to learn what you need to learn. It's going to focus on the competencies that you need to have to be, and this is true for undergrad or grad, like that you are going to learn what you need to be competent in your field. And also, it says to me they have a good relationship with their former graduates, because that's who's going to precept for them. Like, it's going to be people who they have a relationship with. And then it also says to me they have a good relationship in the community, because when you need to send people to your local hospital, that's not going to work if you have sent them lots of people who were not good, or if they have hired your graduates and they have been not good, they're not going to want to take your students. So I would say those three things are the biggest things for me.
Jill and I have done so many webinars, so she literally
Right.
took the words out of my mouth. I could not agree more with everything she said. I just want to emphasize the clinical placement piece. I think that's huge. And the one piece I will add that I know Jill will agree with me on is ask the question, are your faculty practicing clinically? We see so many academic or so many programs where the faculty in the specialty programs are not practicing. The higher you get up in academics, you're teaching 100% of your time, and there's so much value. I think it's why students come to our programs, is because having your educators also be practicing and really understanding the ever-changing landscape of healthcare, and applying that knowledge base to practice is I think really invaluable. So I think that's the other piece I would add, but I really appreciate all of Jill's points.
Yeah. Real quick before we close with the final question, Jill, you mentioned board pass rates. Could you quickly comment, like at the at the RN level, NCLEX passing rates are like public knowledge. Like you can go and find it on the state website, right? State NCLEX pass rate. I don't think that's true for, okay, can you comment, like, how would I research and find a specific school's board pass rate?
Yes, I would really encourage, if you're applying to graduate school or you want to be a nurse practitioner, you can see who's the specialty director for your specialty at every college. My picture and my email is listed on the University of Colorado's website, and you can email me and schedule a meeting, or we have webinars about our program sometimes. And I think it's really important to find that out and to engage. I think, especially for pediatrics, like our programs are small across the country. Like, I think in the United States, there's like a little over 6,000 peds acute care nurse practitioners. So you can, that's like not a ton. And so I think engaging and asking, I am never offended when I get a message from a student that says, hey, I want to know these 5 things, because what that tells me is the student is actually being really thoughtful about their education, where they want to go and what's important to them. University of Colorado probably doesn't like it, but I have counseled people who have inquired about my program, like, hey, I don't think this is probably the best fit for you. You live in Illinois. You have 5 programs in Illinois. What you're telling me is it's going to be really difficult for you to move here. While I'd love to have you, please come if you want. Like, I want to encourage you that these are great programs for you here. And so, I wouldn't have been able to have that conversation with someone if they hadn't engaged with me first. So do not be afraid to reach out to the program director to set up a meeting to have a conversation. I kind of think of it like a job interview, right? Like when I'm interviewing for a job, I always tell people, like, you should interview them too. Like, it's not a one-way street. This is like a relationship that you're going to form over time, and it should be as much of a good fit for you as it is for them.
Yeah, awesome. Well said. All right, well, let's go ahead and close. We get a little personal with the last one, and we'll go Jen first and then Jill. So question is, what is one piece of advice that you received from a mentor, a friend, a colleague, that you'd like to share with others?
I think it was like my first day on med-surg as a nursing student. I was so nervous, and she's like, fake it till you make it. And I would say, I just like love that. Like, it's like there's a lot of like trusting your gut, and you've got this, and you have to really believe in yourself, so that the people around you can believe in you as well.
Fake it till you make it. I have that on my refrigerator. It's just right there every day.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think about some advice. I don't know if it's like advice that a mentor gave me, but I think advice I would give people looking to either be in undergraduate nursing or graduate nursing or thinking about it is like, you don't have to feel so much pressure. Like I think I kind of mentioned that like my transition to college was really difficult. And actually, when I started in nursing school, I didn't say this in the beginning, but I almost left nursing. I actually had an advisor and I was like, I don't like this when I was in my med
Mm,
surg clinicals. And I thought, oh my gosh, here, this is my fifth major. And what am I going to do? And that mentor said, hey, why don't you try neonatal intensive care? Why don't you try pediatrics? Like, and she said, there is a million things in nursing that you can do. There's actually jobs that aren't clinical practice. Like, you don't have to leave this field. Take a breath. It's okay. And I think that actually applies to anything. Like, you don't have to feel so much pressure because um, nursing can take you anywhere. You can work in business, you can work in education, you can work in public health, you can work in a
mm,
hospital. Like it really, there's really a million things you can do. And so just sort of keep an open mind about it. And then I think the other thing is don't feel pressure like you have to decide it all right now. I went to become a nurse practitioner because my friend that worked in the ER with me was doing it and she asked if I would take a class with her. I never had a goal to be a nurse practitioner ever. And so I think people look at other people and they create a story in their head for who they were or how they got to be where they are. And I think not everybody who gets to these leadership positions had some amazing goal to be a leader and, was the top of their class. I already said I lost my scholarship, right? Like, I think you don't have to feel so much pressure to be perfect and to decide it all right now because life will take you a million different places.
yeah, well said. That's great clothing. Well, thanks to both of you. I want to thank Jill Marks and Jen Rosen for joining me today. And thanks for joining me on College Bound Success, College to Career. If you found today's episode helpful, please be sure, follow, rate, share it with someone who's navigating their own college journey, thinking whether they're thinking nursing or whatever it is. So for more tips and tools and support, please visit my website at mastalskicoaching.com. I'll put the link in the show notes or follow me on LinkedIn. And until next time, stay curious, stay confident, and stay boundless. Thanks again to Jill and Jen for joining me. Have a great day, everybody.